Greetings my dear subscribers. I bring to your attention the famous game of the first world champion Wilhelm Steinitz played during the tournament in Hastings in 1895 against Kurt von Bardeleben. In this game, Steinitz played white and moved forward with his king's pawn. Black responds symmetrically. White attacks black's infantryman. Black defends this pawn while simultaneously developing a piece, and after the initial moves an Italian party appears on the board. White takes aim at the somewhat weakened f7 point in the opponent's position. Black is doing the same thing and Steinitz plays c3 here with the idea of building a powerful pawn center. Black develops his piece and presses the e4 pawn. White plays d4 with tempo attacking the bishop. After the exchange in the center of the board, the bishop advances, writing out a move to the white king, and here the strongest for white is to cover the bishops, after which black usually changes to d2, plays d5 and gets an equal position. But Steinitz plays in the spirit of the Romantic school of the 19th century, the knight c3, sacrificing a pawn on the square e4. It is e4 that is considered the strongest, and after white castling, they spend a long time looking for compensation for this pawn. Bardeleben played differently. He immediately launches a counterattack to the center of d5, which allows white to seize the initiative since they exchange on the d5 square and hid the king in a safe place to capture with the knight. Now it turns out that it is bad for black to capture on square c3, since after this capture and attack with the bishop, white responds with queen b3, attacking both the bishop and the f7 square, sacrificing the rook to a1. But if you take this rook from white, the decisive attack is on the black king. In the event that black takes the bishop to c3, then white takes the pawn altogether, although perhaps black should have gone for this option for the wrong purpose, to win the pawn by moving knight c3, since this leads to the loss of a piece to knight c3, white plays queen e1 double strike and as a result, black loses a piece, and in order to hide the king in a safe place, although after the move queen c2 on the board there is material equality, while white has the advantage of two bishops in an open position and a spatial advantage due to the d4 pawn, but at least this option is much better than what the party meant. And in the game Kurt played bishop e6, finishing the development of the minor pieces, but now white attacks the queen. Black defends against this attack. There are massive exchanges on the d5 square and then an exchange on the e7 square. If black manages to hide the king in a safe place, then they will have an advantage in the ending since white has an isolated pawn on the d4 square. That is, black will play c6 and then put pressure on this weakness, position of the enemy, but the trouble is that it is Steinitz who does not allow the enemy to castle. He plays rook e1 tying up the knight. Black went here f6, hinting that he can play king f7 and make an artificial castling, but white clings to the knight on square e7. Now black is forced to defend this knight. Then white puts the rook on a half-open line, presses the pawn c7 Bardeleben, just in case, pushes the pawn forward, takes control of the central square d5, but this does not prevent Steinitz from carrying out a pawn sacrifice with the move d5, making a decisive breakthrough in black's position. It is impossible to capture with the queen because there will be a mate on the e7 square, which threatens a capture on the c6 square with damage to the pawn structure. Well, in principle, with the winning of the pawn, since it will not be possible to take with the queen there because of the same mate on the e7 square, so black has to take on the d5 square, and now white activates his knight with the threat of going to the f5 knight to create 3 attacks against the e7 knight. Black has to free himself from the pin by moving king f7. White plays knight e6 threatening with the move rook c7, followed by a sacrifice on the square e7 and the rebound of the white knight. It is necessary to somehow defend against this threat. The blows come one after another. Now Steinitz strikes from the right side with the move queen g4 with the threat of capture on the g7 square, followed by checkmate on f8. Black defends against this threat. White plays knight g5, writing out a move to the king and attacking the unprotected queen. Bardeleben is forced to defend the queen, after which a terrible blow arrives, sacrificing the rook on square e7. What should black do now? To capture with the king on the square e7, a check will follow. Another check will follow for the king to retreat. Well, now, as black does not defend himself, in any case, he will be defeated. That is, on rook c5 there will be a move. Rook e6 e6 to take on e6 is bad because black does not have checkmate on the first rank. The white ligaments will gain a decisive material advantage. If on a step from square b4 the king goes to c7, then there will be an attack from the knight, and to continue the king b8 white plays queen f4. The only defense is the move rook c7, but then white takes on the c7 square. They already have an extra piece threatening to capture on the a8 square, but to capture on square c7, white plays rook e8, and this is mate. So, we have considered the first possible option. In the event that black takes the queen on square e7, then white breaks through to c8. Well, after this exchange black has to defend from Shah. The continuation is queen d8, and after the exchange of queens on square d8 white gets an extra piece. In the end there is nothing to talk about here. Taking these options into account, Kurt von Bardeleben decides to retreat with his king to the f8 square. His calculation was due to the fact that white does not have time to hit on the d7 square, since linear checkmate on the first rank threatens. When making his move, Steinitz took this possibility into account for his opponent. He plays here rook f7, writing another check to the black king. You cannot take the rook because of the move rook c8. Well, we have already seen a similar option. As a result, white gets a huge material advantage on e8. The king cannot leave the e1 square because of the check, and the black king gets checkmated. The only way to prolong the resistance is to retreat the king to the right. But then there will be another check from the g7 square, the enraged one, and to capture on the g7 square, he takes with a check on d7, gaining a huge material advantage in the game. Black has played the king h8. White now takes on the h7 square. Black cannot capture all the time on h7 due to the fact that white manages to break through twice on the c8 square with a check, and so already on move 25 in this position, Bardeleben admitted himself defeated. The fact is that when the king retreats to g8, white gives check. The retreat to h8 requires one more step. Now take the rook. Well then, step from square h7, check from square h8. Gradually white the queen approaches the enemy monarch, and here the only move is to cover with the queen, after which the black king gets checkmate. In the event that in this position black leaves the king on d8, white plays queen f8, has to defend with the queen, but then check from the knight and a beautiful checkmate on the d6 square. Just like that the game could have ended in checkmate. But apparently Kurt Bardeleben saw all these options and decided not to continue resistance, laying down his arms on the 25th move after white continued rook h7. Well, apparently the reason for black's defeat in this game was the unsuccessful playing of the opening. They made a bad move d5, which allows white to seize the initiative. But here they also played the bishop e6 poorly. It was necessary to exchange on the c3 square and castling. Although white received the advantage of two bishops in an open position, well after the move in the game the bishop e6, Steinitz took advantage of the weak position of the black king, made massive well after the move in the game the bishop e6, Steinitz took advantage of the weak position of the black king, made massive exchanges in the center, then exchanged on the e7 square and created a killer pin along the e line. Subscribe to my channel.